Loud,
Cool.
admit all, and then kick it off. Do you want to do an intro or are you good?
I'm good. I'll send you the video and I'll send you a copy of that description to look over.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Thanks,
Thanks, man.
Boomer.
Good to see you.
All right, bye.
See ya. Hey, everybody. We are supposed to have 16. We have 7, I think, including me. So we're just going to hang out here for a minute. I'm going to get all my screens set up. If anybody's got any questions that they want to make sure that I talk about or touch on, throw them into the chat if you would. Dwayne just told me that the um, the Zoom license has changed. This is no longer the webinar, so there is not a Q&A. There is a chat. So just throw it into the chat if you want to. We'll get going here in 4 to 5 minutes, maybe. There is a recording of this, and I think that you'll need to ask Dwayne. I don't know if it automatically goes out to everybody or if you have to ask him, but ask Dwayne, um, and he can send you one. I actually just asked him right before everybody got on. I asked him if I could get a copy as well. I'm trying to get in the habit of doing a little blog post after each one of these. I'm so bad at getting blog posts created and put out there, but I teach a bunch, so it's like might as well just piggyback on those. So I'm going to share my screen, but continue to kind of click around. So let's see here. All right, hopefully that, somebody give me a heads up and let me know if that actually shared my screen or not. Cool. Okay, thanks. All right, cool. Well, it might just be the 7 of us. That's all right. It's really nice outside. We probably lost 10 people for that. I think you guys all have the ability to turn on your microphone and your camera if anybody wants to. Don't feel the need to. If you've got questions, dump them in the chat or just turn your stuff on and ask. Not sure how many of you have taken classes from me before, but I'll go ahead and get slowly started here. Let's see here. I always start out with a handful of disclaimers. They've evolved over the years, especially now that things are virtual. So my name is Boomer Sassman. That's not a disclaimer, but let's see here. I have a fire station that's across the street from my house, and so that might happen. It's active. I don't really hear them these days, but everybody else does, and I seem to hear them when I'm teaching more so than otherwise. I will do my best to finish all of my sentences. I will do my best to keep things linear and not jump too abruptly to some other topic or some other screen. The internet is anything but linear, so that's sometimes tough. But this topic specifically, analytics, can be tough to keep up with. So I'll do my best to try to keep the pace quick, but not too quick. I taught this class last week through the Blue Ridge Community College Prospering Conference and had 1 hour to do what used to be 3 hours of content. This is 2 hours, and so that's a little bit more cushion. Let's see here. Let me jump back over to that. I'll finish all my sentences. I'll try to keep things linear. There's a fire station. Ask any questions if you've got them when I get to a particular topic. Feel free to throw something into the chat if you want. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in the chat in case anybody has questions that you don't want everybody to see. My goal in teaching, regardless of the topic that I teach, is to make these topics less stressful and hopefully more digestible. Specifically, this class and the Google AdWords class are a little, they're tough topics. They're deep topics. There's a lot to these platforms. And so because of that, I'll do my best to kind of skim the surface of what's needed and then kind of do little deep dives when it's needed. So my main goal with this analytics class is to right off the bat say there's way too much inside of Google Analytics for me to teach even in a day. There's way more than I even know. And so I'll do my best to try to get through as much as I can and point out the really like the 10 really important areas in my opinion that you should maybe jot a note down about and be able to kind of jump back into at given times. Google Analytics in this case is going to be kind of the bulk of the topic, but I've altered the title of this presentation. It used to be just like Google Analytics. That's boring to spend 2 hours or 3 hours just in that one tool. And there's a lot more out there that can really help out in other ways that are still kind of data tracking related to your website, but they're not inside of Google Analytics. So there's 2 other services that we'll look at. So most of this will be Google Analytics. That's where we're going to start. I'll try to keep things lively and not dwell too long on any particular topic. If anybody does have specifics that they're interested in as far as how to find a certain piece of data, let me know either through the chat or through email. And I think so it's 3:09 on my clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here. There is going to be a recording. I don't have access to it until Dwayne sends it to me, so if you want a recording of it, just ask Dwayne. And I will also try to point out when I get to these like 10 important spots, I'll try to explain like where they are in the navigation of analytics or which tool we're in. So we'll go ahead and get rolling with this. Tiny little bit more about me and the company. So my name is Big Boom. My name is Boomer Sassman. The company is Big Boom Design. We've been around 13 years, going on 14 now. We used to have an office in West Asheville on Haywood Road. As a lot of people have done, we got rid of our physical office location back in October of last year. So we're all fully distributed around Asheville now, which is it's been an easier change for us than most because we're all techies and we're used to Zoom and Slack and Dropbox and Drive and all these tools. So, but ultimately we're an educational web design and internet consulting agency. Educational web design means that I teach as much as I can, as often as people let me teach, and on topics primarily focused on things like WordPress is a big topic. So 3 different levels of WordPress: WordPress for websites, WordPress for blogging, and then a Divi class, which is we just put one on the books. That's going to be April 21st. So Divi is a WordPress theme. E-commerce, which is next week. and then Google Analytics and Google AdWords. Those are the primary topics. We also try to roll education into every project that we work on. So I try to educate, our clients about what we're doing while we build the site. We try to get them in the mix with it, and then obviously give them training so that they can manage the website as they move forward in time. But we also stay around if people need us to jump in and help out. The internet consulting piece of it is, I'm a big data fan, at least from this perspective. I'm not a big fan from the Big Brother concept, data tracking, but if they're going to track it, we should track it as well, at least if it pertains to our website and our content and our clients and our customers. These tools are out there. A lot of them are free, specifically Google Analytics. So might as well take advantage of them if we can. Moving right along, I'm going to blast through this slide pretty quick. I want to leave enough cushion of time for us to kind of meander through some of these tools and not run like right up to the end, which is 5 o'clock. So I'm going to do this fairly quick. Normally I'll take 10 to 20 minutes on this slide, but I'm going to blast through it a little bit quicker. This is my attempt to outline kind of the roadmap that a lot of people should follow, or at least be aware of, as you kind of move through this digital journey, this website journey, whatever you want to call it. And so the first thing here, my first bullet is understand how people search. And this really hits at the core of this analytic topic that we're going to cover today, which is, what are people searching for? And really, a lot of times we don't ask ourselves that question. We think, I want to be number one on Google. Well, what do you want to be number one on Google for? Not why, but what terms? And I think that is where all of this should kind of start, is you've got some idea of your customer or your client, or at least of your product or your service, and you need to start identifying, who are they? And more importantly, what are they searching for? They being your potential customers or clients, or somebody that might, buy a product of yours. So there's some tools out there to help you identify this. The easiest and cheapest and best thing is ask your current customers or clients, spouse, kids, parents, whoever that might be, employees. You can also just go to Google and start typing, and the autocomplete in Google is there because that's what people commonly search for. And so I think early on, a really important thing is to start to align your site, your content, your image names, your domain name, and really just your overall message, trying to get that aligned with what people are actually searching for. If you've taken a class from me before, I've told this story in the past, but I had a chiropractor years ago. That was a client, and I said, what do you want to be number one on Google for? And she said, back subluxation, Asheville, North Carolina. And that's when I started to realize that the more we know about our own industry and about our own business, the worse we are at guessing or thinking about what other people might search for. So essentially, we get too close to the terminology. We know too much about it. And so it's a really important thing to, kind of harvest these terms and these keywords from folks that are a step removed a lot of times. Not to say that your knowledge about your own product, service, or business or industry shouldn't play into that list, but it's an important thing to try to craft that list from people who don't know as much as you, because ultimately that's who we're going after, is people who don't know a lot about whatever your topic is. So understand how people search, and that is, I'm going to distill that down to say the goal is to identify a list of long tail terms. And long tail terms are things that are statements or terms that people would search for that are either geographically specific, they're specific to your product or your niche or your service, but they're not generic. They're specific to some degree. If Google does anything really well, it's helping us find these really, really specific, like needle in a haystack concepts, websites, web pages that kind of answer these questions. So that's what I always like to start with, is that's really a goal for everybody. It should be identify these long tail terms. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time kind of digging into that concept, and I'll show you how to find those. We figured out that list. Next bullet down is we need to build something. I'm a huge fan of WordPress. It's great. It's about 40% of the internet these days. It's free. It's open source. There's a lot of great stuff about it I could ramble on about, but I won't. But you have to have a home base. You got to have a website. And ideally, that website is not Facebook. Ideally, it is something that you can manage. You can change the content on quickly if you need to. and it can kind of grow alongside of you and your business. Third one down here is kind of the bulk of what we're going to talk about, and that is to track your visitors. Once you've got your site set up, you need to get some tracking installed, and we'll talk a little bit about that, about how to actually do the install of it. And then let it track, and don't get too obsessed, especially if it's a brand new website, brand new domain name. You've got a long road ahead of you before you collect a lot of traffic and a lot of data around that traffic. So set it up, kind of forget about it for a little while, and then jump back in as you need to. Next one down here is to carve out a niche, and this is kind of an add-on to the very first bullet. So the very first one there is come up with a list of terms that you want to be found for, and then try to align your content and your website to those terms. This next one down is to kind of further dig and never stop digging deeper into those terms and that niche that you've identified. Your business will evolve over time. Your services will evolve. Your customers are going to evolve. The terminology that they use evolves. Try to stick with that, and over time, make sure that you're still going after the terms that people are still searching for. There's a tool that we're going to look at called Sem Rush that digs deep into that. And then there's another tool, a competing tool to that, called Keyword Keg. They both do the same thing from the keyword discovery perspective. Sem Rush does a lot more when it comes to competitor discovery and analyzing your website and audit, site review audits and things like that. So Sem Rush is kind of the big boy version of Keyword Keg, but they're both available. Craft your design. This talks about visually how you've laid out your website, and we're going to look at this tool as well. And so heat mapping is where you can put a little bit of code on your website and make it real easy, and it'll keep track of where people are clicking throughout your website, where they scroll to, where they pause and focus. And it even does video recordings of people's cursors as they move around and navigate your website. So this is extremely helpful and frustrating if you have an e-commerce website where you know what you want people to do because you built the website, or you instructed somebody to build a website, or you at least have been on it more than anybody else ever has. And you watch these people navigate your site and like hover over the button that you know you need them to click on, and then they like mouse away real quick. It's like, oh, frustrating. But it's really, really intuitive, and it can kind of help you fine tune your site design. And then last on this list is spend wisely, Google AdWords. This is something that a lot of people never bump up against. Google AdWords over the past couple years especially has really ramped up the evolution of that service. It's not a surprise because they make a tremendous amount of money through that service. A couple years ago, I looked up the stats, and I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago, they were bringing in like $2.5 billion a month. So I only assume that's gone through the roof even further. At one point, Google AdWords was the bulk of Google's revenue, and Google AdWords is really what let them grow to the point that they've gotten to buy YouTube for $1.4 billion, to build out Gmail, to analyze people's emails and then serve ads back to them, launch satellites up into space to map our entire world, and then have Google Maps. So Google AdWords was really the catalyst that gave Google this big like shot in the arm. It was like, here's all this money, go build some stuff, and then track everything that everybody does with your stuff. So I try to not be so conspiracy theorist these days with these presentations, but there's a little bit that still kind of comes out. I love the internet. I love the evolution of it. It keeps me very hooked and very kind of focused on where it's going. So, all right, we're going to go ahead, and I think we're going to jump straight into analytics. So I'm going to go ahead and at this point change over straight over to analytics. And again, I'm trying to push some of the, other than that last slide that I did, I'm trying to push a lot of content out of these presentations so I can really focus in on the tools, because I know that's what everybody is here to learn about, is how to use these tools, how to set them up, what to do on a regular basis. So if you've taken other classes of mine before and I kind of lollygagged as we got into the things, I'm trying to not do that so much these days because I have an hour less of time. So having said that, we're going to dig deep into Google Analytics now. If this is the first time you've ever jumped in or seen Google Analytics, I want to do a little bit of anatomy of like what we're looking at and navigation, like how do we navigate around this interface, because it can be really overwhelming, especially if this is the first time you've ever seen it or jumped into this. So The first thing I'll point out is how do you get to this? It's analytics.google.com. And if you go to analytics.google.com, or you could just Google the word analytics, it'll be number one because it's owned by Google. If you don't already have a Google Analytic account, they'll basically say, set up your first account. I can't show you that screen because I have hundreds of accounts already set up and tied to me. But essentially, you're presented with a screen. It's a very easy process. They say, create your first account. They want to know the name of the website, the time zone that you're in, and then if you want, you can give them an industry that you're also in. So you could pick real estate, or you could pick pet care, or you could pick accommodations, whatever it is. You don't have to do the industry selection. That is just, if you do pick the industry, what it does is it lets you see a benchmark and compare your website and your data against other people in the same industry. Sometimes that's helpful. Often it's not. If we were in like a massive city, if we were in Atlanta, we were in a plumbing business, maybe that would be good to be able to compare against other big cities and big companies. But Western North Carolina, we have a lot of really unique businesses, and so the industry, in my opinion, the benchmarks skew and push you off in different directions that you necessarily shouldn't follow. One of the main things that I'll try to emphasize as we move through this is how to identify the outliers, the outlying data, and then at what time you should be like, that is an outlier and it shouldn't affect my content decisions, or it shouldn't affect changing the design of my site. So if you've got like one person or two people in the mix that have a really weird browsing behavior on your site, don't flip your site up on its head based on like one or two people. We want to really go after this bell curve concept and make sure that we're hitting the middle of that curve and adjusting our site and our content based on the bulk users of the site. There's one exception to that, and I'll point it out once we get to it. Okay, so as far as the anatomy is concerned, the first thing I want to point out is at the top right, we've got a date range. Okay. By default, this is going to start with 7 days. This used to be 30. I'm not sure why they changed it. I always go in, and the very first thing I do, I click on the date range, and I'm going to change this to the last 30 days. We're going to look at the previous 30 days. So it's always going to look at 31 days back is when it starts, and then it will stop at yesterday, at the last full day. So I'm going to click apply, and now we're going to get a 30-day snapshot of the site. One other thing I'll point out related to this little dropdown is there's a compare to. So I can click this option, compare to, and I have two options here. And I can either compare to, in this case, we're tracking 30 days. So it's going to be the 30 days directly behind it. If I was tracking 15 days, it would be the 15 days directly behind it. Or I can change to previous year. And when I do that, we lose that little orange section because it's now in the previous year. But if I click apply, it's going to overlay last year's data and this year's data, assuming you have data from last year and to this year. So you can use the compare to get an idea about, season by season, year by year, what's been happening. I will say, we track hundreds of websites, and we help, 50 to 100 companies on a regular basis look into their data and make decisions about what to do based on this stuff. Last year was weird. This is still a weird year. And I'm really, really surprised every time I jump into a different analytic account as to whether or not it's 100 times what it was or half of what it was. And so it's based on the business. It's based on your industry. It's based on whether or not your business is seasonal. So it's been a really weird year to kind of compare against last year to this year. And it will continue to kind of be that way. So a little disclaimer on that one. Surprisingly, from what I understand, tourism over the past 15 months has been bigger and better than it's ever been, which is just weird to think about, but that's how it goes. So we've got this overlay, this comparison. I am going to, I'm going to unplug my phone so it stops making those noises. I am going to turn off the comparison so that we're not looking at too much data. I want to kind of clean it up a little bit, but I always like to point out the comparison up here because a lot of us do have seasonal related businesses. All right, so I'll turn that off. I'll click apply. We're going to get back to just the regular 30-day snapshot. So next thing I'll point out is that as I scroll over this, as I hover over, I can get to a particular day and it's going to give me this day, this date, and here's how many people showed up on the website that particular day. So 409 people on March 4th came to the website. Just so that you guys know, this website is it's a cabin rental company. This woman is based, I think, in like the Ashe County area and rents out 50 to 100 different cabins with different, sizes and shapes and amenities and different things. So we can hover over, we can get some understanding of when things spiked. And one of the cool things that I'll briefly show you right here, and it's right up front, but I missed this for years, I feel like. And that is the ability to add these different segments. And so, while it might seem like we started at 0 and we've ramped up to 100 really quickly, I'm going to slow the pace back down here in a minute, but I do want to show you this because it is a pretty cool ability to do this. So if I click on add segment, we have all of these different segments. And so what is a segment? Well, in this case, we've got all users, all the users that came to the website. That is the one main blue line that we've got. But I can parse out the data based on the different segments. So for instance, if I wanted to see, if I was curious, like why did the traffic spike that day? I can come in here and I can turn on direct traffic. I can turn on organic traffic. And let's do referral traffic. And when I click apply, what this does is it's going to overlay. Again, it gets a little visually intense, but that's okay. We're going to trim it back down. But now what we can do is we can see that, hey, on March 4th, it spiked, and it spiked because of the orange line, and the orange line is direct traffic. So this is a great way to map out and figure out, did your social media post do this? Did the article in the magazine that you got featured in, is that what drove traffic to you? Was it direct traffic? Did you go to some networking event and gave out cards? Whatever it might be. You can also pull in things like, Adwords and lots of different segments here to kind of get an understanding about why did the traffic spike up or down. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, I'm going to turn these off. We're going to, for the rest of this, we're just going to be looking at the all users section here. Mostly because I don't want it to be too overwhelming too quickly. It can get very overwhelming if you want it to be, but we're going to keep this simple for now. Okay, scrolling down, this next thing on here is I want to talk about these 8 stats. And the reason why is because as we move through analytics, the tool, we're going to continue to see these 8 stats, and all of the data that we get to is measured and organized by these 8 stats. So it's an important baseline, in my opinion, to have some understanding of, well, users, new users, what's the difference there? So we'll go ahead and start rolling through these. Well, the first thing here is we had in the past 30 days, again, all this data is set by the time frame that we just looked at. In the past 30 days, there's been 5,783 users onto the site. Now, some of those users might have come back a second time. So they're in that 5,700, there might be one person that created multiple instances. If we want to see the true set of like number of eyeballs or people, then this is what we're gonna look at the new user section right here. We can also see this represented over here in this pie chart. But so we've got 5,400 unique people that came to the site, and then some number of them came back a second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th time, whatever it is. And that stacks up into more users. Now, this many users, 5,400 people, created 9,300 sessions. So if I go to a website and then I go back to that same website, that was just 2 sessions. And then if I go back to it again within that 30-day range, that's a 3rd session. So this can kind of give you an idea of how sticky your site is, how often people are revisiting your site. A lot of us have, a single visit session. My site, there's not a whole lot of, we don't do a lot of blogging. There's not a lot of content. They find us, they call us, maybe they don't. They email us, maybe they don't. So the bulk of our users at Big Boom Design, it's single session. They come in, they contact us, or they don't. They might come back a second time as they're like vetting companies. But so 5,400 users created 9,300 sessions. And And then this next one, number of sessions per user, is like how many children do you have? 1.63 children. We've got just those numbers averaged out together. On average, when somebody comes to the site, they're going to look at 1.62 pages on your website. The average there is about 1.5. So that is just a little bit above average. The next stat here is page views. And so 5,400 users during 9,300 sessions looked at 3,100 pages. That's how many individual page views you got on your site. Now, if you have a site that's really large, let's say it's e-commerce, or in this case, it's cabin rentals, and you've got a bunch of cabins. Maybe it's a chamber of commerce, or a site that has a directory built into it where there's lots of postings. Those types of sites typically will have much higher page views because there's that many more pages to browse through. In this case, somebody might go and they might look at 3 to 5 different cabins, whereas otherwise, most of us probably have a website where they're going to look at the home page and then maybe the about page or the contact page. All right, next on here, and one last statement about this. Back in the day, late 90s, early 2000s, if you had a website back then and you got any kind of data sent to you, typically from your web person or your server, they typically would just send you total page views. And that's because it was the biggest number. It was the most impressive number. It's 31,000 is more impressive than 5,400. And so they would send you that stat. As time went on, we realized that's not really the most significant stat to look at. All right, so the next thing over here is pages per session. How many individual pages were created based on, how many pages based on those number of sessions? I think a few minutes ago, I might have misspoke and said that the number of sessions per user. This is saying on average, everybody's going to come to the site 1.5 times, essentially. This is actually how many pages on average somebody's going to look at. And this stat is on average 1.5 pages. So in this case, we're looking at about twice the average. People on average look at 1.5 pages. And in this case, on this site, they're looking at about 3.37 pages per session, per time that they went to the site. All right, this next stat is my favorite, if I were to say. This is, in my opinion, the best gauge of success. And I'll explain more as we kind of dig a little bit deeper, but average session duration, which used to be called average time on site, is how long do people spend in one session? How much time do they sit and stare at the website? Regardless of how many pages they're looking at here, what's the single session average time? This is also more than twice what average is. Average session duration is about 1.5 minutes, and this we're looking at almost 4 minutes, which again is indicative of a site that has a lot of pages, a lot of cabins, a lot of products, whatever it might be. And then this last stat here is bounce rate. This is probably one of the most kind of misunderstood, and it's also a stat that leads people astray often. Bounce rate is essentially if somebody comes to your site and they don't go to another page, they have bounced. They bounced off that particular page that they were on. Bounce rate gets pretty confusing. I've got an infographic that I found that makes it look really cool, but it doesn't simplify the concept. So if you want to dig deeper into bounce rate, go ahead and just go Google like an infographic for bounce rate. You'll see what I mean. But everybody bounces eventually off of a website, right? The reason why I don't like this stat, at least shown here on the overview screen, is because that is the bounce rate for all of the pages, all of the posts, all of the products, all of the pieces of content on the website, all averaged together. And in my opinion, bounce rate is a very important stat, but it should be looked at on a page by page basis, device by device basis, and not looked at as a site-wide entity to make changes on the site. Okay, having gone through those 8 metrics or stats right there, we're going to start to jump through this left-hand column. We're going to navigate around, and I'm going to call out kind of where I'm going and what we're looking at as we do it. The first section that I'm going to look at, which I skipped last week when I only had an hour to do this, but I'll briefly show you, is real time. This is a depressing screen for most of us to go and look at because chances are you go look at it and you got a big fat 0. While this site gets a lot of traffic, there's nobody on the website right now. Maybe it's because it's a Thursday, maybe because it's nice outside. I don't know. I don't try to guess, but there's nobody on the site right now. If you did have an active e-commerce site, or if you get a tremendous amount of traffic, oh, we got a person. So we just got somebody onto the website. They're in Wilmington. They're on the vacation Meadow View on Laurel Creek, Laurel Springs, NC page. They came from cabinsonlaurelcreek.com. That's the referral that sent the traffic, the visitor, over into this website. This little line right here is this person literally staying on the website, moving through. They're almost at the 45-second mark. By the way, 45 seconds is the threshold that we always want to try to get people to. So they just got to 45 seconds. That's enough time to like look over the home page and then maybe decide to go to another page or not. We'll see if they hit the 60-second mark, and then we'll move on. So the three thresholds that we always try to get people through are 5 seconds. That's the first one. That's the first tough one. If you keep them for 5 seconds, 45 seconds is the next one. And then after 45 seconds, it's about a minute or a minute and a half, whatever your average time is for your particular site. They're still on the site. They're looking at this particular page. So this is cool. If you do have an active site and you go here, sometimes, you know, that number is just up and down and you're gaining and losing people, and you can kind of watch the traffic flow throughout the site. So we'll go ahead and move on. I'm going to go back down to audience. And before, when we first started, we were at overview. So I'll just kind of regroup. We'll come back here. One thing I have noticed recently, and this, I'm not sure when this changed, but it keeps jumping back to the 7-day mark. So I'm going to try to remind myself as we continue to move through this to reset it to the 30-day mark. So we looked at this. We're not going to stay here longer than just a second. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on, we're going to click on geo location. So this is the first section. So audience is the top level, geo is the second level, and then location now is the specific page that we're on. So here we've got a map of the entire world. We've got the darker spots, obviously the US in this case, are where the bulk of the traffic came from. So in the past 30 days, we had 5,783 visits, and 5,691 of those were in the United States. We've got the number of new users, session, bounce rate, pages, duration, all those things that we already looked at. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the United States. This is going to drill us down into the country, obviously. And now I get the same layout based on the state breakdown. This woman's business is in North Carolina. Most of her cabins, if not all of those cabins, are in North Carolina. So that makes sense. But then quickly followed by what we all, if we're all in North Carolina, then what we all know to be the case, that most of the tourism that comes into our area comes from South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida. I guess Virginia's in the mix as well. So this is not a super surprising breakdown. Again, we've got all those same stats listed out. Here's where we can get in and we can look at, you know, bounce rate as well as average session duration on a state by state basis. And we can kind of get an understanding of attention span or, you know, how quickly somebody might bounce from a particular state. What are you going to do about that? No idea. And that's, I guess, I want to talk just briefly about that. These tools are great. A lot of times you'll find a little nugget of data and you'll spend more time thinking about what to do with it than it took you to actually find it. My biggest piece of advice is write it down and move on. Don't dwell for too long on any particular good or bad thing. Write it down, move on. Unless that was your goal with that little session, was to dig in and find the good stuff or the bad stuff. But don't spend too long trying to overanalyze what may or may be the case for some of these visitors. So I'm going to go one level further. I'm going to dig in and click on North Carolina. I will point out you can either click on the map up top, or you can click on the list down below. And this is where it gets pretty cool. I like to start out these classes with this, because this is data that I think a lot of people don't realize is collected, or at least you thought it was collected, but that we can't get access to it. That's not the case. We very much can get access to this. So now I can see that within North Carolina, most of the people that come to this website are in Charlotte. 14% of those that are in North Carolina are in Charlotte specifically. And then again, we can get specific data about bounce rate, average session duration, and some of these more important stats that are in the mix. You know, the other thing that the other tactic, I guess, that I see from a lot of people is they say, well, so, okay, what do I do with this? Does this mean that I should advertise or market into the overserved or the underserved? And I don't have a clear-cut answer for you because I don't know everybody's business, but those are two very distinct strategies. Are you trying to get to this data and understand the city that people are in, and then go after where you already have saturation in that particular city? Or do you want to try to identify, like, wow, why don't we have more people in Greensboro or Winston or on the coast? And then from that, based on what strategy you want to take, you can either say, well, okay, I'm going to run Google ads, or we're going to do a magazine ad, or we're going to join a chamber of commerce in that particular city or area. So the path that you take is up to you based on kind of your business goals and what type of business you have. That's not my job, at least not in this. It's to say, hey, here's how you get to this particular map. But I've seen it do some really interesting things for people. I was in a big meeting years ago, and the organization was looking at where they should get billboards, literally where they should put up billboards for tourism related to a town in Western North Carolina. And I just raised my hand. I was like, let's just pull up the data and just look to see like where the traffic is now. And then y'all decide, do you go after the places that there is a lot of traffic or there's not enough traffic? And it was a very clear cut. We just overlaid this map with a Google street map, and it was like right there, 77, Highway 77 and 40. That's the hot spot that you should do it. All right, moving on. Next thing I'm going to do is come down here and jump down to mobile. And then I'm going to go to overview. So again, we've got audience, mobile, overview is where we're at. We've got three different segments or three different device types. In this case, we've got mobile, desktop, and tablet. They used to lump tablet and mobile together, but now there's enough people floating around with iPads that they split it out. So this is pretty average. These days, I remember like years ago when the web people were like, one day there's going to be more mobile visitors on your website than desktop users. And that was like a decade ago. So I guarantee you that at least 50% of your traffic is on a phone these days, unless you're in like a really, really corporate industrial type of business where you deal a lot with like office buildings and people fixed at a desk. You probably got at least 50% of your traffic on mobile devices. So this is where I want to look specifically at the bounce rate. So, you know, we've got 60% of traffic is on a mobile device, followed by 35% on a desktop, and then just 4.5% on tablet. And that breakdown is pretty standard. I'm going to jump over here to bounce rate. And if we were to kind of rebrand bounce rate as something more like effectiveness or experience on the site, the higher the number, the worse it is. Okay. And again, this isn't super surprising that the mobile bounce rate is the highest. People are on the move. We know if they're on their phone, they might not necessarily be in their car, but they're moving. They're not fixed in a chair, probably. And so also the majority of sites out there are built with desktop in mind first. And so the experience, based on how it was designed, is probably the best viewed on a desktop. And that's just how it is. But 60% of our traffic is on mobile, but it's the highest bounce rate. So depending on what percentage of your traffic is on a mobile device and how high that bounce rate is, kind of gives you a sense of urgency, or at least gives you some idea about how significant it is for you to really focus on the mobile experience around your website. Whenever we go in and we rebuild a website that was not mobile friendly or what's called responsive, and we rebuild it to be responsive or mobile friendly, we always look to make sure that bounce rate drops significantly. And if it didn't, then we didn't do a good job with that mobile rebuild. You know, at one point there was, you know, the need for a mobile version of your website and a desktop version of your website. And those days are long gone now. There should be one version of your site that is fluid and expands and has what's called breakpoints based on different screen resolutions. The next thing I want to point out here is, again, average session duration. And in this case, not super surprising, we've got almost half the session duration for mobile as we do for desktop. Rebecca, give me more context on the anybrowser.com. I've actually never heard of that one. I will use that as a good segue because it's something that I skipped and I almost talked about. And I want to jump just up one little thing here, and that is under technology. And maybe this is what you're talking about. So right up above mobile, we do also have technology here, which lists out all the browsers and all the browsers that people are on: Safari, Chrome, Edge, Safari in-app on phone, Samsung, Firefox, Internet Explorer. I love that Internet Explorer has been taken down that many spots. That is fantastic for all of us. It's surprising in this case that Safari is number one, and Safari is the Mac browser. And so we can also see now that the bulk of the users on the website are on Macs. What that means about your audience is up to you to interpret. Let's see here. So I'm going to jump back down to mobile real quick, and mobile, and then let's go look specifically at devices. So now what we've got is a list of all the devices. And some of you might be thinking, there's not that many devices. There's like, 15, 20 different phones out on the market right now. In the past 30 days, there have been 322 different devices across those 6,000 people, however many it was. So the fact that there's in 30 days time, there's 322 different devices is shocking, but that's how it is. And so then when we look over that list, we start to realize, oh, well, it's the S10 and the S10 Plus and the S9 and the S9 Plus and the S Note 9, and all the different Apples and all the different devices. So we as builders of sites use this data, both the browser layout as well as the device layout, a lot to make sure that if a particular site, most of the users are on Safari and they're on iPads and iPhones, we make sure that we do, quality testing on those different devices to make sure that the experience for that demographic is the best possible. We all want all of our sites to perform well on all the browsers and all the devices and all the different, connection speeds, and that's just not realistic. So the goal there is hit the high points. You go after the bulk, you go after 80% of people are on Chrome. Let's make sure it's rock solid on Chrome, followed by. Okay. Next thing down here that I want to talk about, but I can't really show it to you. It's not super new now, but it is something that you have to go in and turn on. And I bring this up because if you're getting into this, whenever you set this up, turn it on right away, because it only starts tracking from the time you turn this feature on moving forward. So the cross-device concept here is that, I've got a tablet, I've got a phone, I've got a desktop and a laptop, and I'm a techie, so most of you might not have 4 devices in front of you right now, but a lot of you probably have at least 2 devices. You've got a phone and a computer. Some of you might have multiple. You might have an office computer and a home computer. And a lot of us stay logged in to the browser, into Chrome, into Firefox, whatever it is. And because we stay logged in to all these different devices, the session can be picked up and stopped from different devices. And so you might start your browsing process looking for a cabin in this case. You might start it on the desktop at work in an incognito window. Actually scratch that, because if you're incognito, it's not going to track it. But let's say you're at work, you're looking on your browser, you're searching for a cabin, you get done with the day, you close your browser, you get in your car, you're at a red light, you stop, you pick up that session, you get home, you look at it on your tablet, you look at it on your computer, and then on your computer, you finally book. This cross-device overlap will map all of that stuff out, and it will say, here are the different devices that this particular user traveled through, and then the actual conversion happened on this device. It happened on the desktop device, but it started on the mobile device. And we can try and make decisions about how people use our websites based on the devices that they're on and when they actually complete the conversion, whether that's a purchase of a product or a booking of a cabin or filling out a contact form or whatever it might be. So the cross device thing is something that has been added in the past, I'd say maybe 2 years it was added, and it's worth turning on, and you can get some in-depth information. If you're just getting into analytics, don't get too distracted with that piece of it. There's a lot better information that you can kind of uncover. Okay, moving on. Again, another section that I want to look at briefly. I'm not going to dig too deep into it because visually it's cool looking, but it gets a little overwhelming. But this is the user flow. And just like with the device section, the cross-device compatibility, or sorry, the cross-device coverage that we just talked about, the user flow shows you how people are moving through your website on one device, let's say. And so in this case, it starts with, well, what country are they in? Most of us, I don't want to say don't care about that, but most of our users are in one country, probably the US. So what might be a better stat here is something like source. So we can come up here and just click in that box and change the source in this case, or we change it to source. And now what we get is Google, Direct, Bing, and then other websites in this case, and then there's Yahoo. And so we've got a lot of different places that people can come from and enter into the site. And so we can see that some percentage of people that come from Google land on the homepage. The homepage is always represented as a single slash. And so in this case, we had, we had 818 sessions that came in from Google from this 30-day span. They changed it again on me. From this 30-day span. That's better. We had 3,200 people in this 30-day span that came from Google. And then the red here is going to show the drop off before they went to any other page on the website. So they came from Google, they landed on the homepage, and then we lost 12.8% of those people, which was 1,200 people dropped off. So the people that didn't drop off, they went through, and the bulk of those folks landed on the long-term page. Some went to the vacation page. And so it gives us an idea of how people are actually navigating through the site. Very helpful if it's e-commerce. A lot of us have been spoiled by sites like Amazon, where you can accidentally buy stuff these days, or you can just do a one-click swipe buy now, and it's just like in your cart, checkout, we know where you live, we got your card on file, product's on its way. If any of us run e-commerce sites, that's like what we should strive for, but that's $1 billion worth of R&D. Most of us have, if we have e-commerce, a 3 to 5 step checkout process. We need to get their billing information. We need to get their card information. We need to ask them if they have a coupon. We need to let them pick how they're going to ship the product or how we're going to ship it to them. The steps along the way to actually purchasing, there's a lot. And so it's really important to kind of hyper focus in on what's the confusing step. A lot of times it's the first step because people just add stuff to their cart and then they have no intention of truly buying. But sometimes they get along the way and it's like right at the end. So it's really worth trying to analyze when people drop off, why people drop off, and try to make that step in the process, either combine that step with another step or get rid of it somehow if we can. Okay, moving on. Next, we're going to jump down and we're going to jump away from acquisition. I'm sorry, we're going to jump away from audience and we're going to jump down to acquisition. We'll go right to the overview to start this. And so acquisition, how do we get people? How do we get people to the website? I used to call these avenues, like avenues that people might come in from. Google has kind of branded this as channels. And so the top channels in this case that we've got are organic search is the top channel, direct, social, paid search, and referral. Now, some of us also might have things like email. We might have things like other sometimes shows up. Other can be things like RSS feeds and other weird types of sites. Let's see here. So organic traffic in this case accounts for 43% of all of the incoming traffic. That's about average, probably 50% of your traffic. If you've done a decent job with optimization and organic content and things like that, probably half of your traffic comes in as new traffic to your site. If you've done a really good job of blogging and unique content, that might be as high as like 90% of your traffic. Organic traffic is anybody that searches on a search engine. So primarily Google these days, but that could be Bing, Yahoo. I hope Ask Jeeves is still around. Ask Jeeves if you're out there. So anybody that comes through a search engine, types in a keyword, results come up, they click on your link, and they land on your website. Now, based on that logic, that's kind of like a referral as well. But because it's such a big batch or big bulk of users, it's housed in its own container called organic search. Direct search is when people come directly to you. They typed in your domain name, they had it bookmarked, something they, you gave them your business card, they typed in your domain name. There's way less information than we can find about the direct visitors because they didn't come in through a keyword, so we can't find that keyword. We can find things like the device that they might have been on or the city that they were in, but we're limited in what we can actually analyze or find out about the direct traffic. Social is on here. If you do if you're active on social media, and this is covered in the, all the social medias, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Howls, there's tons out there. But probably Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest are probably the top performers for most of us out there. That's going to show you all of the social traffic there. And yeah, that's all I'll say about that one. Oh, let somebody else in to the talk. There we go. Next one on here is paid search. If you're not running any Google ads or Microsoft ads, this channel or avenue just won't show up. So it's okay if you don't have all of these. You might not have certain traffic coming in from certain things. Paid search, 259 people in the past 30 days. Referral is next on here. Referral traffic is when somebody clicks on a link on another website and gets referred over to your site. So the common instances here are things like Chamber of Commerce, TDA or Tourism and Development Authority. In Asheville, it's Explore Asheville is that site. Romantic Asheville is another example that's pretty active. If you're up in the high country, Ray's Weather, he owns like 60 different cities worth of weather data, and he refers traffic. So Romantic Asheville, Ray's Weather, they have a little link somewhere. Maybe it's part of an ad, or maybe it's just somewhere in some text. Somebody clicks on that, and they go over to your website. That's a referral. What I always like to do is try to get people to understand that it's not necessarily, the goal isn't just like the most traffic from all of these channels. It's quality traffic from these channels. And for a lot of us, social media has the highest quality. And how do you measure quality? We'll talk about that in a second. But referral is also way up there as far as the quality. If somebody's going to be on another website and trust that website enough to click on the link and go over to you, there's a trust factor, a trust value kind of associated with that. So, social is a big one there. We don't do any social media at all within my company intentionally. And so it's almost zero from there. We might get some from like LinkedIn traffic, but we don't do posts on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. Some of you are probably the complete opposite. And you get a lot of quality traffic through social media. So how do you measure quality of traffic from a channel? In my opinion, it's bounce rate and time on site, or average session duration, which we'll look at here in a second. So the average session duration is how long did they spend on your website? And what we find with organic search is if people are out there Googling things, they're more likely to go to your site, browse through, and then bail. Again, there's that 5-second threshold, 45 seconds, and then a minute and a half. And it's tough to get people through all three of those thresholds and have a high trust factor on organic search. It's just tough. But despite the fact that that's where most of our traffic typically comes in from. Stop rambling about all that. What we're going to do now is actually dig into some of these channels. So right now I've just clicked on acquisition as the heading. We've got all traffic, and then we've got channels is the specific page that we're looking at right now. It's a repeat of what we just saw, but in this case, what we're going to do is I'm going to click on, in this case, organic search. And while I do that, I'm going to have some water so I don't lose my voice over the next hour. Okay. So we've dug down into specifically the organic search channel. These are people that found the website through searching for some keyword on some search engine. So one of the other anatomy things that I want to point out is at the very bottom right, we can change the number of rows. So I'm going to change this to 50 because we've had in the past 30 days, we've had 38 people come in through organic search. Specifically, that's not true. Let me say that one again. there are 38 specific keywords that have driven traffic to the website. There's been a lot more people than 38, but 38 specific keywords have driven traffic. Now, some of you are probably seeing this one right up top, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. This one right up top is tough to ignore, and that is not provided. And this is a big giant bucket of search terms that is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I'll address the elephant in the room right off the bat. Not provided started happening in 2011 when Google went to HTTPS. And I mean literally, they put this little lock up in the search bar, and their entire ecosystem, Google's whole environment or whatever you want to call it, was all of a sudden like shielded inside of this secure environment, HTTPS. That S comes from what's called an SSL, or secure socket layer. You should never need to know that except on a trivia night, but SSL stands for secure socket layer. And so when they went to this SSL encrypted site, they basically said, if you're logged into Google and you search for something, we're going to track you and collect that data, but we won't take that data, or specifically what you search for, and we won't put it inside of tools that marketers use like Google Analytics. So unfortunately, most of us probably don't get this much traffic, but also most of us have 95 to maybe 100% of our keywords locked away inside of not provided. Currently, there is no way to unlock those 3,475 various keywords, except or unless you're using Google Adwords. If you're using Google Adwords, you get to see what people Googled and then they clicked on your ad, and that's because you're paying for that ad. Whoever wrote that terms of service for Google knew exactly what they were doing there. So it's an incentive, it's a quiet incentive to use Google AdWords to be able to harvest that data. In this case, this is not the AdWords class, it's the analytics class. So we're going to kind of dig into this and talk more about what is here and what we can learn from this. But that's what not provided is. It's people that search for something while they were logged into Google, and therefore we don't get to see what that was. If the courts subpoena Google for you, then they will find out. But otherwise, that's kind of got a veil over top of it. All right, so we got that out of the way. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to get the screen laid out right there so we can kind of talk about this. So first column there is the specific keyword. What did they Google? Followed by, again, users, new users, sessions, bounce rate, pages per session, average session duration. And these others that are lingering over on the right-hand side that we haven't talked about yet are related to goals and conversion tracking. If you have an e-commerce site, it is worth taking some time. Go find a blog post or a video that talks about how to create and set up the goal conversion tracking. It's a great way to measure the full, I call it closing the data loop, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But spend some time to get your conversion tracking set up so that you can track and monitor these people. What I mean by the closing the data loop is that it's great to know that, one person came in from the term cabin in NC with private trout stream access. That's great. That's a really cool long tail term. That's like the essence of a long tail term. That's gold right there. But we don't know if this person booked a cabin. And that is closing the data loop. If we knew that the person that came in from this term looked at 8 pages and spent a minute and a half, and then if there was a little number 1 right there, we'd be like, got him. That term brought somebody to the site, they spent a while, they looked at these pages, and then they actually booked. In this case, this site, we just kind of monitor analytics. We didn't build the actual site. Certain sites can't track that end result, that end conversion. If you have an e-commerce site, this is where you would set up the, like, whatever page happens right after the checkout. Like, hey, thanks for your purchase. It's on its way. Bam, goal conversion. If you don't have an e-commerce site and you've just got, let's say, a contact form, you can do the same thing. You can set your contact form to redirect to a thank you page. And it's relatively easy to do. especially if you're on something like WordPress. And you would want to create a thank you page that's just basically that. Thanks. Thanks for booking. Thanks for buying. Thanks for whatever. And then that page has a very unique URL, thank-you typically. You would create a goal saying, hey, if anybody lands on this thank you page, that's a conversion. And that's a really good thing to kind of take some time to dial in to make sure that you're getting that full data loop and you're able to kind of put eyeballs on the keywords. Okay, so that's the goal, these 3 columns on the right that I wanted to talk about. But now what I want to do is we're going to go back to this long tail term. This is a bit of an extreme long tail term. Typically, they're not that specific. But like I said before, if Google does anything really, really well, it's that. It's you can Google the most specific thing imaginable and you'll get results. Like it's rare to Google something and have Google be like, sorry, we got nothing. Like I've had it happen, but typically it's from some weird like number stamped on the side of a carburetor that I'm trying to figure out, or like something super obscure, like a error message on a site that's like too lengthy or too specific to that site. You can Google almost anything and find lots of data. So one of the most important things in this whole journey through digging into analytics is to identify your long tail terms. This goes back to that very first bullet about how do people search. And not just how do they search, but what do they do once they land on your site? And so how do we identify, first off, like what are these particular terms? And then the next thing is, how do we measure the quality of the term? And in my opinion, the quickest and easiest way to both find your long tail terms and then find the really valuable long tail terms is to get to this screen, acquisition, all traffic, channels, and then just click on the heading, average session duration. What we just got here is it shuffled all the terms, these 33 terms that we have, and it put the term at the top that created the longest stay on the website. So this person who Googled Four Seasons Vacation Rentals Jefferson, NC, that happens to be the name of the business. But this person also spent 28 minutes and they looked at 5 pages. That's great. Now, next thing down, Seasons Vacation Rentals and Sales, very, very similar. That's interesting. Appalachia long-term cabin rentals under $1,500. Spent 20 minutes and looked at 7 pages. And as we go down through this, you'll be able to identify the fact that, you know, the quality terms here are the terms that don't contain the name of the business. That's important. A lot of people say, well, I'm number 1 on Google when you Google Big Boom Design or whatever the name of your business is. If you're not number 1 on Google for the name of your business, that's your first goal with this, is to get that straightened out. But the goal here overall, the big goal, is to be able to be found for the services that you offer or the products that you have, with people not knowing that you are the company or the person that they should hire or buy from. So extract your brand name from this list of terms. You want to kind of overlook those. I don't want to dig too deep into this, but I will point out the fact that you can search and filter. And so you could click on advanced right here. And I could say, you know, let's say this list had like 1,000 terms in here. I could say, I want to exclude the keyword containing your business name. And that's a great way to just get all the outliers out and to be able to see the quality long tail terms. So if we do have if we do have data that we've collected on our site, and we've got any amount of data landing in this organic search section, identify those long tail terms, do that by clicking on average session duration. The longer somebody spends on your website typically means that it's a higher quality visit, and typically they are the ones that purchased and rented or filled out your quote form or whatever it is. As we look over, you know, sites and traffic and goals, when somebody is about to buy or hire or fill out that quote form, typically they got to that moment by way of a long tail term. Rarely do they get there from cabin rentals. They got there from pet friendly NC cabins, something like that. All right, I'm going to move on. I'm going to go back to channels. So to do this, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click on all up top. I'm going to now drill down. I'm still sorting by average session duration. Again, remember this like trust factor. is, in my opinion, based on how long somebody spends. In this case, referral is up top. So let's take a look at referral. And again, this is going to give us a list of the websites that are sending traffic to your particular website. And right here at the top, we've got cabinsonlaurelcreek.com. I don't know if this is a friend of the owner's. I don't know if she's paying to have her website listed here. I have no background on that. But that particular site sent in the past 30 days, sent more traffic to the website than any other referral source, any other website specifically. We've got 38 listed total. Some of these is in here. You might also find some like bogus, spammy SEO type search engine things that pop up. That's just how that happens these days. These like bots or crawlers generate fake traffic at times. So you might go in and find that to be the case. You know, I can identify a couple of them in here. The knot.com is like a wedding site. Let's see, Visit NC is obviously that's the state tourism site. We've got New River Lodge NC, Find Rentals. So we've got a handful of these in here that, you know, let's say we were actually paying for traffic from some site like Romantic Asheville or Ray's Weather. We want to make sure that whatever we're paying for that traffic is not only substantial, but, you know, substantial enough, but also quality traffic and not spammy traffic that stays for 10 seconds and then leaves. All right, and then back to the surface on the channel section. And beyond that, you know, we can look at social, and this is going to divide out and show us the specific, like, hey, you know, it's obvious there was a big probably Facebook post that happened there. And then we can go and kind of dig deeper in to that particular section and identify a little bit more info about what post it might have been that spiked the traffic. You can get that same data inside of Facebook, but I'm always a fan of kind of, you know, if you've got one data source that aggregates all this stuff like analytics, it's good because you can kind of overlay and pull similar reports and compare within one tool. Okay, I'm going to move on. We've got 45 minutes left. I want to make sure that we at least touch on a few of these other tools and then leave a little bit of time for questions. So the next thing down that I want to look at is we're going to skip over ads because, again, a lot of you probably aren't running Google Ads. You might be interested in it, but I teach in this case, 2-hour Google AdWords class. This is a good like kind of prerequisite in a sense to that one. It's definitely a good idea to have an understanding of analytics before you go spending money with AdWords. But those are, again, to have like one data source that pulls in all this data. Analytics is a great tool for that. And then that data would show up here. We're going to jump down to behavior. And I'm going to go to site content, all pages. So behavior, site content, all pages. This is going to list out all the pages on the website. And so we've got, in the past 30 days, we've got 31,668 individual page views. And then these are the pages listed out over on the left. So I'll expand this out a little bit. So what is the breakdown of all the pages and where does all the traffic go? So I want to point out a couple things here, a couple new pieces that have shown up. So the first thing I'll point out is number one, that first line, single slash, is the homepage. It's typically the homepage of your website. If you go to your analytics and you see a single slash, and then right below it, you see /index, it means that analytics, or more specifically your website, is set up where people can get to the homepage of your site, and then also the homepage represented as /index. It's not a bad thing, but it's something that you might want to mention to either your hosting company or your web designer to get that cleared up. And you want to try to consolidate those two line items into just what we see here, which is the single slash. So you might see that on your site, some of you. So slash or /index are both your homepage. For most of us, our homepage is going to be the top of this list. Most people land on our homepage. At least 50%, I would say, of traffic lands on your homepage. Well, that's fine. But what's interesting is that that's not always the case. And in this case, only 14% of all of the visitors landed on the homepage. Well, let's turn the tables on that and look at all of the other people who did not land on the homepage. So it's something to keep in mind that the homepage isn't always the first experience that people have onto your site. A lot of times it is, but not always. And so what do you do with that? Um, if you go to the screen and you have some blog post, or in her case, some cabin that shows up, or some product that shows up top above your homepage, it's not a bad thing. It's a really interesting thing. You have some piece of content that has generated so much interest out there that Google is sending more traffic there than to your homepage. Now, ultimately, that should be the goal when you really think about it, is if the goal is to get people to the most specific content that they're looking for, we want to create these cornerstone pieces of content, this evergreen content, these really these quality landing pages, if you wanted to call it that. And so it means that you've done actually a really good job, intentionally or not, to create that type of landing page. Blogs can be a really good landing page concept because they dig deep into one particular topic, typically. The problem sometimes can be, specifically with blog posts, if you've got some blog post that talks about, in this case, let's say she had a blog post that was like top 10 cabins to rent on the New River to go trout fishing. I don't know. If that blog post is getting a ton of traffic there, we need to make sure that we've got cabins that are on that river that we can rent. And we want to make sure that there's an easy conduit or an easy path for people who land there to then either jump back to the homepage or to find those particular properties. So if it's a blog post, maybe we say, hey, web designer, can we put those 10 cabins that are on the river, can we put them on the bottom or down the side of this particular blog post? So always look for opportunities to create that call to action or connect that call to action to your top performing pages. That's an important thing. So as we move across this list here, these columns, we've got page views, unique page views, average time on page, and then we've got entrances. This is a new metric or stat or column that's shown up now based on this screen that we're on. And this is saying, let's go ahead and click on that heading. And again, homepage is the primary page that people enter into. So this is 30% of all the traffic. This homepage is their first experience. Well, 9% of the traffic, their first experience is this long-term page. Whatever they happened to Google drove them to this particular page first over the homepage. Again, just kind of, something to pay attention to. If you've got any content up above your homepage, dig a little bit deeper into that. What I have found is that a lot of times, if you do have a piece of content that performs better than your homepage, the bounce rate is probably also much higher. Sites that have really active blogs, typically blog posts have like a 90% bounce rate. And so if we were to scroll down this column right here, we can see the homepage has a really low bounce rate of 27%. That's really low. That's good. And then as we move down, we get slightly higher and higher and higher. And the bounce, again, the higher the number, the worse it is. So if you've got some killer piece of content and you've spent a lot of time working on, let's say it's got a video on there, you've got, you've put a lot of focus into it. If it's got a bounce rate of like 70 to 90%, you need to go dig in and figure out exactly why. Does it take too long to load? Is there just no navigation that gets people to what they want? What is it about that page that's creating that high bounce rate? The other thing I'll point out here, and I think this is going to be one of the last elements of analytics that we look at, is this page title. Right up here, we've got primary dimension. Currently, it's set to page. So it's going to show us the URL or the address that would actually show up in the little browser URL top box. I can change that to page title. And now I'm actually going to get the meta title of that particular page. This is a great way if you're kind of starting your SEO or search engine optimization journey. Title tags and description tags, again, meta title and meta description, are two of the most important things that you can work on. And typically they're the two most accessible things. You can get to them easier than you can get to some of the more hidden and convoluted and difficult things to optimize. And so you can come into your page list and you can click page title. And now we get a breakdown of what are the actual title tags of these different pages. And we can identify ones that might need a little bit more attention. And we can start working down our list. Again, it's a good idea to kind of sort that by entrances or page views or something like that. and start with the most popular pages, not the ones that few people get to. All right, moving on. One of the things that is important is the site speed, and site speed is mentioned here inside of analytics. I've never been a fan of Google Analytics's built-in site speed. Yeah, it gives us some info. Average load time 3.41 seconds. Cool. It doesn't really tell us what to do about that. 3.4 seconds is great. It could be better. They can always load quicker. But if we wanted to shave that down to 2.5 seconds, what do we do? And they don't do a great job of helping you with that. They've added this speed suggestion section, but it's still really lacking. So I want to call out a tool that is called GT Metrics. It's a free tool to use. And I'll use myself here as a guinea pig. We'll see what we're loading at here. So you just go and grab your domain name, you plug it in. It'll take 10 to 15. Sometimes it takes like a minute. Sometimes there's a lot of jobs like queued up in the system as this tool gets used. But what this is going to do is it's going to go out there, it's going to ping your site, it's going to track and monitor everything that loads, all the different pieces of JPEGs and CSS and JavaScript and all the complicated stuff that presents your site in the end. And it's going to give us a few different ways to look at that data. A lot of sites have these different like paints where we get these different cycles. So it's going to load the first little bit, and then it's going to run back and load a little bit more and a little bit more. And then in the end, we get kind of the fully loaded time, 3.9 seconds. 4 seconds is what the benchmark is. You want your site to load in under 4 seconds. So we came in just under the wire there. One of the most important things that I'll call out here is, I said my criticism about Google Analytics is they don't give you very clear cut, like go fix these things. GT Metrics does do a pretty good job of that. So I clicked on this waterfall tab right here. And now what I get is this big old breakdown of exactly every single image, every single file, and how long things take to load out. Now on our site, we've got handful of animations that load. The header, there's like a person that flies in, the clouds roll in, there's some animations. And so some of those kind of queue up and stack up for the user. This is also based on their connection speed. So if somebody's on a phone, you might have certain elements that do or don't show on certain devices. I think we have a video on our homepage right now, and we've got it set to not load for mobile devices, but load it for desktop. And so as we scroll down through this thing, we can go through and we can identify little, like, even right there, there's the Google Analytics script that loads. We can see exactly how big it was. And most of the time when we scan sites, what we're going to find is that there's two things that slow down sites primarily. There's lots of factors, but two in particular. Really big images and slow servers. Those are the two things. Images are probably the biggest culprit. Most of the time when we get hired to speed somebody's website up, it is they or somebody they hired or their nephew that built the website got a bunch of pictures, threw them on the website. They didn't name them and they didn't size them. And those are two very important things, both for optimization of like Google optimization, as well as for load time, which Google over the past couple of years has said, y'all need to speed up your websites. And if your site loads quickly, we will put you higher in the rankings. For a long time, we kind of told people that and kind of assumed that that was the case. Google has stepped out and said, that's the case. Make your websites load faster. And so because of that, it's the server companies out there have stepped up their game. Web designers have stepped up their game to try to really focus on load time. Phones and tablets have done a lot to kind of push that wave to make that a thing. And so again, the 4 second mark is where we're at now. That's going to keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So if you run your site through this tool and you're coming back in at like 12 to 15 seconds, first off, run it again, which I'm going to go ahead and do and see if we come in under 4, a little bit further under 4 than we were. But run it a few times and kind of get the average there. Don't take that first run as like you know, oh my God, I need to go in and fix this, run it again. It might have just been a weird little hiccup. Some of that's related to the server that you might be on, and you could be sharing space with a lot of other sites. There's all kinds of plugins that help with this stuff, both with shrinking images as well as load time caching. And there's this thing called a CDN, content delivery network, that certain servers use, where they put your images on one server and everything else on another server, and they optimize them differently. CDNs are pretty cool. All right, I shaved a second off of that just by rerunning it. So 2.9, I'm happier about that one. And so again, you know, and they give you stats. They say, hey, we're pinging your site from Vancouver. We're using Chrome. The connection, I believe, if you don't set anything, it's going to be like a 4G type of connection, but you can throttle it back. We do a lot of sites for Western North Carolina towns, TDAs, EDCs, chambers of commerce, in like little towns that don't have great cell service. So we can actually log in and change the settings to say, load this from a 3G perspective. And then we really get a true glimpse at what users in that area would experience. Not like my internet out in Leicester is that great, but whatever. Okay, we got 30 minutes left. I want to move on to two other tools. The first one that I want to look at is called Crazy Egg. Crazy Egg is the heat mapping tool that I talked about. So this is a site, it's a rental company. This is actually just coincidence that we looked at Four Seasons and then now Holton. But this is a property management company up in Boone. And what this has done is we have an account with Crazy Egg. It's not very expensive to just set up and track 1 or 2 pages of your site. And you put a little code on your site. There's a WordPress plugin if you have a WordPress site to easily get it added. And what it'll do is it'll track all of the clicks on the website. Literally, where are people clicking on the website? And so what we can see here is that we've got these hot spots. We've got, let's see here, we've got, where's my total count? We've got 7,800, I'm looking at the bottom left here, 78, almost 8,000 clicks on the site. And that's in the past 60 days, roughly. We can see here that property search and rental information are way high up there. We've got submit work order is a prominent button here. We've got people that are using the search system over on the right. And as we scroll down, we get kind of deeper into the site and we get into the cold region. We get into the region that, you know, people don't always scroll down to the bottom. That's the main thing that we use this tool for is, all right, great. We've got a bunch of people clicking on these buttons. Cool. Should we maybe rearrange the menu items to stack all the most clicked on items at the beginning? That's one option. Should we maybe make this submit work order button a little bit more prominent or pull it up higher, maybe even put it up in the menu? And then the other thing that we can do is turn on the scroll map. And the scroll map shows us where people scroll to. So as I scroll down, we have this black line right here that's the average above the fold. And so that means that on most people's screens, when the site loads, that right there is the bottom of the screen. That is really important to understand what is above and what is below the fold. Above the fold comes from newspapers when they were folded and dropped at your driveway or on your doorstep. And whatever is above the fold of the newspaper is the most important stuff. Ironically, laptops still have a fold. And I just think that's kind of cool that we still deal with that same concept, but decades later. Not to say that some of you aren't still getting newspapers, but the above the fold concept is still a thing, whether it's a screen or a laptop or a phone. So what we always try to do, we've got this scale here. We've got white hot at the very top of the scale. What's the most looked at area? And then it gets colder, colder, colder until we get down kind of like deep into the ocean concept. And as we go all the way down, cold. We're not getting much traffic. So if we were to flip back and forth between the heat map and the scroll map, what we're trying to do here is identify things that are in the cold region that are heavily clicked on. And in this case, we don't have much. We've got, we got that email address there. We've got some clicks on these little links, but those links are already up top. So we've done okay there. But if you've got a site that has let's say like a 3-column footer, you got a map, you got a newsletter sign up, you've got your contact info, maybe, track your site and figure out like, hey, a lot of people are scrolling to the bottom and clicking on the email address. Maybe put that email address up in the little tip top, header bar, something, similar to this. But, you can have a little tip top bar there with phone number, email address, social icons, things like that. So identify stuff that shows up in the cold regions that are heavily clicked on, and try to figure out how to move that up towards the top. Now, the other thing I'll point out is that we all have multiple versions of our website. And by that, I mean we have phone, tablet, and desktop versions if our site is responsive. Responsive means that the website responds to the size of the device or the screen resolution. So Crazy Egg is also a fantastic tool to see what your site looks like for other people, on their particular devices. So here we've got 6,100 clicks. This is on the phone view. We can see that little hamburger menu is heavily clicked on, followed by submit work orders. And then not a whole lot. There's our search box that's heavily used. And look at that. So this is interesting. On the phone version, not a surprise, people are wanting to click on that phone number. So what we might want to do is take that phone number and maybe just create a little sliver at the top, phone, email, maybe phone, email, work order, or search. And then that search can anchor people down. So anything that you can do to help streamline that user experience on the site is a really important thing to, identify first, and then kind of say, well, what are we going to do about this? Again, don't dwell too long on, why are they doing this or why are they doing that? It's tough to change people's behavior. You can change your site. That's the much easier thing to do, especially when you get into the video. And I'll see if I can quickly find a video recording that we can watch here. Last one I want to point out is tablet. So there's our tablet view. Again, 3 different screen breakpoints. Very similar hamburger menu, probably search, and we don't have the phone heavily clicked on there because it's a tablet. All right, so those are the 3 different heat maps that I wanted to look at. I do, however, want to jump back to this first one and then go to the Confetti Layout. Now this gets a little overwhelming, as some of these tools can do. And so here what we get is a color-coded breakdown of all of the different clicks throughout the website, and in this case, the referrer, where they came from. So this first one up here, we've got Google. If I turned everybody off except the Google traffic, that's what the Google traffic clicks on. How does that compare to the direct traffic? It's not very different. Those two have kind of a very similar overlay. They're all popping into the same spots. And that's just based on this particular site. You might see on your site that is drastically different, where people come from and what they actually click on. One of the things that I like to do is come in here and look at new versus returning. And now we get the return folks, and it's not a surprise. Work order is a big one there. Less so on the new, because they're trying to rent the property. They haven't rented the property yet, so they can't have any work orders to submit yet. So new versus returning is a good one. But this list it's intense. You can sort and analyze this data based on a lot of different things. So at the bottom, these UTM things, these are related to Google AdWords and campaigns. So you can actually connect the dots between, like, hey, somebody that came in from this particular search campaign, like the long-term rental campaign, they're doing this. They're clicking on these things. Time to click is an interesting one, how long it actually takes people to click. At the top here, we've got 10 to 15 seconds. So most people click within 10 to 15 seconds. That, again, if we tie that back to how long a site takes to load, if the site takes 5 seconds to load, you only got another 10 seconds to get them to click on something. So we start to get an idea about how quickly people are looking at it, analyzing it, and making a call or making a move. And that click could be leaving the site, or it could be, digging into the next page. Another one that's good here is day of the week. And so this is data that we can also get inside of Google Analytics. But again, we can kind of overlay all this stuff, and we can start to get an understanding of what the popular days are on the site and what the time of day. So day of the week, time of the day. So Mondays between 12 and 12:30 is when the bulk of their traffic comes in. Again, you can use that data to inform an AdWords campaign. You can push the majority of your budget to run during the sweet spot time and day of the week. All right, I'm going to move on from Crazy Egg. I want to dig into SEM Rush a little bit and then hopefully leave some time for questions. Y'all have been quiet, which is either a good thing or a bad thing. I think some of you left and you're playing outside like I want to do, but we got another 30 minutes. SEM Rush. Massive tool. I could have spent the last hour and a half just inside of this tool. I love it that much and it's that amazing, but it's not free and it's kind of expensive. It is a tremendous amount of data, but it is worth it. We have a slightly larger account so that we can track lots of sites inside of this. We pay a couple $100 a month for this, but we use it as our business to operate in a lot of cases and to analyze both for our clients as well as analyze competitors for our clients. But there's cheaper versions of it. I think there's maybe a trial version, and then you can also just sign up for a month, get a bunch of data, and then cancel your membership. So what I want to do is, let me try to find here a let's do this. We're gonna look at Highland Brewing, which is a client of ours. But what I want to do is we're gonna pick a competitor of theirs. So let's go after, and I'm not sure why Wicked Weed doesn't show up first for Wicked Weed, but we'll go there. So wickedweedbrewing.com. I'm gonna grab their domain name, and I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna show you kind of on the surface what this tool can do. So I'm going to come to the home page and just paste in the domain name. So SEM Rush is a keyword and competitor analysis tool. Okay. So it analyzes the keywords that the website ranks for, and it analyzes the competitors that you might be competing against. In this case, Wicked Weed is a competitor of Highland Brewing. And so Highland Brewing, we want to make sure that they're performing well. And so we pull in competing breweries against them. And so what we can do is we can come in here and look at the overall keyword landscape. So we can look at all time, going back to, in this case, 2012. This first report here is showing the number of keywords that they rank for. And so they, I don't remember what year they got purchased, but it's, they had a big rise. They've kind of ridden a wave. And over time, they rank for different numbers of keywords. Let me rephrase something that I said incorrectly. This is not the number of keywords. This is the number of organic visitors, the number of visitors that they get to their website through keywords. March of 2019, this is a speculative type of tool. They don't have like concrete data. They're not tracking with a piece of JavaScript. This is kind of constantly querying Google and building this big database. So these aren't like spot on the way that analytics is. But March of 2019, last year, they got 34,444 visits in that 1 month organically. If they were running any AdWords, it would also show the paid traffic as an orange spike. This is how we can see, in some cases, people experimenting with AdWords, spending a lot of money accidentally or intentionally, and then trailing it back off. And some do it seasonally, and so we can get a glimpse at, in most cases, our competitors or the history of a new client of ours and what they've done. This lower section, this is the number of keywords that they rank for. And so again, if we look at May of 2019, here we've got, let's go back to, there we go. Out of the 6,100 keywords that they ranked for, 167 of those were in the top 3, spot 1, 2, or 3. 109 were between 4 and 10, and so on down the list. And then the bulk of their keywords were somewhere between page 5 and page 10. That's the 51 to 100. Going down further, we get into things like the keywords that they actually rank for. And again, Wicked Weed is not our client, and we don't have any access into their backside of their website or their analytics. But from the outside perspective, I can go in and I can see exactly what keywords they rank for, what SERP feature, SERP stands for Search Engine Results Page. And in this case, it's saying, they've got this little, these are the different kind of like little highlights that Google has. So like the knowledge panels, that box that tries to like answer questions before you actually go to somebody's website. We've got a specific link, site link. We've got FAQs, videos, and then reviews. So they rank for Wicked Weed Brewing. Not a surprise. It's the name of their brewery. They're number one. Not a surprise. That's good for them. They get about 35% of their overall traffic from people searching for their name. And how many people search for that? About 1,000 people per month. KD is a measurement of how competitive it is to increase rankings for that. 81 is a high number. If it's 100, it's like almost impossible to go head to head with them. Rightfully so, it's the name of their business. And then CPC is cost per click. And I know I ran through those a little quickly. We got 20 minutes left. And then to me, what's really interesting in this case is that it's not their homepage that's ranking for this term, it's their terms and conditions page. I don't know if they know that, and that's a really interesting thing to see there. But that's the specific page. Again, going back to analytics, your homepage isn't always the top performing page. Sometimes it's your terms and conditions page or some other page. So interesting there. We can also go in and look at, I can click on this diff column, and this is whether or not they've moved up or down for that particular keyword. Okay. In this case, it's not pulling in much data as far as the diff and the changes month to month. So let's change gears here and let's look at a client that we are tracking. Again, even though they're a client of ours and we have access to this, this tool doesn't necessarily. This tool is just like a speculative kind of looking from the outside perspective. But if I come in here and I click on the top 50 keywords, so we're tracking Highland against, we're tracking them against Catawba, Foothills, Green Man, and Highwire. Those are the three different ones that we're searching against. And so if I come in here and let's drill this down and find a date range that makes a little bit of sense here. Let's look at a week. That'll work. So there's going to be a 7-day snapshot. And so the cool thing about this tool, once you get really deep into it, is out of the thousands and thousands of keywords that both Wicked Weed and Highland Brewing rank for, we can pick a handful of them to track and monitor. We can get updates along the way as they happen, like hourly if we want. And this is more of like a long-term perspective. So if we want to say like, hey, who are we going head to head with right now for free brewery tour Asheville? Highland's number one. Yay. Awesome. Good for you, Highland. Catawba was 49th, has moved up 3 spots to 46. Foothills in this case is not ranking for that term. Green Man is ranking at 36 and hasn't moved up or down. And Highwire, sorry, I had to zoom way out to see this. Highwire's 37, they moved up 2 spots to 35. And there's 20 people per month that search for that. So not a huge search term, not a big deal. But in some cases, some of these terms have a good amount of clout behind them or a good amount of users searching for those things. So this is what we call a keyword landscape. And this landscape is constantly changing. And I mean constantly, like minute by minute sometimes. There's all these Google algorithm updates that happen. And one of the cool things about this tool, at least from my perspective, is that by paying for this service, we get access to all the people that work at Sem Rush and all of the digging that they do when Google makes an algorithm update. Meaning, Google makes an update, it hurts or helps, sometimes both, and back to back. Let's say it hurts a lot of people as far as their keyword rankings, and Google makes that update, a bunch of people drop. Well, then immediately after that algorithm update, they're going to incrementally change things. And sometimes that swings way back up top. Sometimes that just brings them up to a baseline and it kind of ping pongs up and down. And it's based on the type of update that they made and how severe it was. I was surprised to see that last year during such a crazy year that they made quite a few big updates that in a lot of cases really hurt a lot of companies. And a lot of times they make these updates based on a certain type of company, whether that is like an educational type of site. So we saw sites like Instructables or, I say Wikipedia just to kind of illustrate the educational type of site. I don't know if they were hurt much or not, but they go after kind of certain types of sites. And the worst thing that you can do when you see one of these is to freak out and make changes, especially if it's a big change. You wait it out. You wait and see what happens. Google has become known for doing these these big updates, and then constantly doing these small little algorithm updates. A lot of times things hit back to a baseline, and you don't have to do much. And what we see is that those that kind of reactionary, like the reactionary move to go in and change stuff, that's when you can actually hurt yourself worse, is not letting the dust settle and going in and like changing all your content. That can hurt you big time. So, all right. So last little bit, I'm going to scroll back in. I'm going to jump back over and let me go in and do a site audit. And I'm going to jump back to, let's jump back over. And let's just go back home here. And I'll go in, let's pick one of these sites here. Let's pick a site that we are actively in the process of rebuilding. So whenever we get a new client, we're getting ready to do a site rebuild. It's really important to identify what the issues are. So this hits on tracking, but it's also more of like a deep dive health of the site. And so ACF is American Chestnut Foundation. If you guys didn't know, we have the national American Chestnut Foundation is based here in Asheville, and then there's scattered up the East and West Coast. It's each state has its own chapter. There's about 20, maybe 25 different chapters. And so the home base here is here. The home base for American Chestnuts is here in Asheville. And so we're getting ready to, or we're in the process of rebuilding their site. And so we set this up and we set it to just crawl and analyze. And so what this does is it comes back with a big old list of issues. So this tool can help us analyze the magnitude of these issues, the number of these issues, and then how we should kind of work through those issues. So to sum this up before I dig into this is health, speed, and security are core factors in tracking and performance. So health, making sure that you've dealt with your site audits and the issues that are found. Speed, making sure your site loads quickly. And then security, which talks to or speaks to things like SSLs and making sure that your site is encrypted and secure. It used to be that only e-commerce sites really needed SSLs. Google, again, over the past couple of years has said, internet needs to be more secure. Everybody should have an SSL. These days, you can actually get them for free depending on the hosting company that you're with. Before anybody asks, I'll go ahead and tell you, there's a thing called Let's Encrypt, and certain hosting companies have that, and those are free SSLs. If you're with a company like GoDaddy, they don't have Let's Encrypt because they charge for SSLs still, and that's a big revenue for them, so they won't probably ever get Let's Encrypt. But the health element of this, in my opinion, is a really important thing. We get a lot of people that say, hey, we want you to optimize our website. And the very first thing that we do is health, speed, and security. And they're like, well, I don't care about that. We just want to rank better. I'm like, health, speed, and security help sites rank better. And so, for me, tracking has gone way beyond just Google Analytics and the depths of what it can uncover. And it has now bled out into user experience and where do people click and how long does it take your site to load and is it under an SSL? And so these days, unfortunately, this topic of tracking is just so much bigger. But luckily, there are a lot of these tools out here, and a lot of them are free to kind of uncover some of these elements. So to spend the last couple of minutes on, what does it mean to have a healthy site? This tool ranks things based on 3 topics: errors, warnings, and notices. Errors are the worst. Hey, you got 25 pages that have duplicate meta descriptions. Again, meta titles and meta descriptions are 2 things that are pretty easily changed. You need to make sure that every page on your website has a unique title and a unique description. Next in line, we've got errors in the sitemap. This is kind of the card catalog in a sense of like all the pages of your website that Google has seen. And they're saying, hey, you got some issues here. A lot of times those issues are pages that you had at one point, and then they've gone away, intentionally or unintentionally, and they're still lingering in your sitemap. So that's one thing to take a look at. 8 duplicate title tags, 2 broken links, on and on and on. We can kind of dig down. And then there's all the good stuff that there's no issues with these different things. That's the first big batch. Next batch down are things like warnings. And this first one on here that these first 2 I'll talk about, and then we'll blast through. Minifying. So we've got this note here that says, you've got 818 issues with unminified JavaScript and CSS files. That's a complicated way to say there are spaces in your CSS and JavaScript files, like spaces. To minify is to pull the spaces out, and it creates a condensed little block of code, impossible to read, but it can speed up your site a little bit, and it can also help with SEO because it speeds up your site. And then alt tags, I'm gonna talk about alt tags, and I'm gonna shoot off on a tangent. I'm gonna call it out before I do it. Alt tags are tags that you can attach to images on your website, and this has been the case since the beginning of the internet. An alt tag is something that you can use to describe what is actually in an image. Visually, what is that image about? It's an opportunity to optimize your site, but more importantly, it pushes towards accessibility and making sure that your website is accessible for those that are visually impaired, those that might be hearing impaired, different ages, different sexes, different races. It's trying to make sure that your site is accessible to anybody and everybody that might want to come and learn that content, or digest that content. And so alt tags are the easiest thing that you can do to kind of help push towards accessibility. You know, I've mentioned over the past 2 hours a handful of things that Google has said, hey, you should do this and you should do this. And so for a long time, this whole Google algorithm thing was a mystery. But over the past couple of years, they've said, make your sites load quicker, increase the speed, have an SSL, increase the security, make it accessible to anybody and everybody that wants to get to it. And so they've given us, in some cases, these kind of clear-cut guidelines. The other one I'll mention there is mobile friendly. Make your website responsive and mobile friendly. And so anytime, you know, there's so much stuff that Google does that they don't tell us about that we kind of have to like figure out. Anytime they do tell us, hey, we're putting attention towards accessibility, pay attention, you know, and see what you can do to kind of get your website in line with whatever their, you know, most recent or upcoming changes might be. Sometimes they're big and very difficult. A lot of times they're not. You know, I think we've seen a handful of these big waves kind of ripple through web design and the internet over the past decade. And most of us, if we've had a website built in the past 10 years, we have just accidentally or intentionally kind of fallen in line with some of these things. But there's a lot of changes that you can make that aren't very expensive that really can increase your visibility to Google and users and just the overall experience for people coming to your website. You know, speeding up your server. You can call your current hosting company and just say, I know I'm paying you $12 a month right now. If I pay you a little bit more, how much faster can this be? Or move your site to a new server. It's a relatively painless thing to do. And a lot of times the new company will move it for you. And they increase the monthly rate, but it's worth it. So, you know, there's a lot of these things that are fairly quick and easy to do that don't cost a whole lot and don't take a lot of time. On the accessibility side of stuff, if your site's on WordPress, there's 24 free plugins that will help increase the accessibility of your site. And one of them is called WP Accessibility. So, you know, take some time, look into these things. I try to give a slightly bigger picture of tracking and really roll in health, speed, and security with the tracking because they really all, if you help out with one, it raises the other one. And so I know we all just want to rank better and higher for more things, but it's a much bigger task than just flip these switches here and there and it's going to happen. So the main thing I'm going to leave you guys with, and then I'll answer any questions. If not, let's all go play outside. You know, set up tracking. Google Analytics is free. It's real easy to get onboarded. You just have to have a Gmail address and you just generate the code. If you have a WordPress site, you can use a plugin to add that code. It's very painless. There's a plugin that we use all the time. It's called Monster Insights. Free plugin, real quick and easy. They say it's the best. It probably is. It's really good. Free plugin, you just load it and it just syncs and creates a handshake and loads the analytic code on there. So definitely use analytics if nothing else. Sem Rush, keyword and competitor tracking, it gets pretty deep pretty quick, but it's an invaluable tool if you're trying to really gain that upper hand against your competitors. Crazy Egg for heat map tracking. There's also a competitor of that called Hotjar, Hotjar. Sem Rush, and then the competitor of that is Keyword Keg, but doesn't do nearly as much of the cool stuff that I pointed out there. Really, inside of Sem Rush, the site audit and the keyword analysis are very valuable to make sure that you're going after the keywords that are actually searched by people. And I think with that is 4:55. We still got almost all the same people that were here, so thank you for hanging in there. Any last minute questions that I can dig into or answer or help address. Otherwise, I'm just gonna slowly and awkwardly close all these tabs. Again, if you want a recording of this, hit up Dwayne. I don't actually know his email address off the top of my head. It's probably dadams@abtech.edu. That's just a guess. Dwayne Adams. Oh, I do have one more thing. There's no handout. So I'm sorry. There's the recording of this, but I will say this, and this is hopefully not like a self-promotion the way that it might seem, but I do have a blog post that I did years ago. If you go to bigboomdesign.com, go to the blog page, scroll down till you see this little tablet view here. It's a blog post that I did. This was my attempt to not dumb down, but give people a quick little dashboard that lets you quickly jump to those 10 or so items that I pointed out inside of analytics. So if you go to this blog post and then you click this link down at the bottom, it will ask you which Google Analytics account do you want to add this dashboard to? And let's see if this still works the way that it did back in the day when I made it. And so I picked the Four Seasons site that we were just looking at. Cool, still working. So it's a quick and easy way. It's like a little shortcuts dashboard that easily and automatically gets added. It shows up under customization dashboards, and it gives you this 3-column snapshot of a lot of the things that we just talked about. So if nothing else, you can grab this. I'll put the link actually in our link to this post in the chat. And this is, again, it's just like a quick little dashboard. You can customize this if you have e-commerce. You can ditch some of these squares and add your own in there. I made this for myself because I was really tired of like forgetting where certain things were in analytics. And then eventually I wanted to I created this dashboard for myself and my own website and businesses. And so then I said, well, I'm just going to start adding this for clients and setting up so that they get these reports as well, because I'm digging through it and some people are paying us to do this for them. But if I'm setting it up, I might as well just automate it out. And this was an attempt to kind of, simplify that navigation and that learning curve of analytics, because it can be really overwhelming. So that's that blog post. It creates this Big Boom Dash is the name of it. And and yeah, and then you can click on any one of these. And the cool thing, that's probably the coolest thing about it, it'll then jump you to that spot inside of the massive nest of wires that is Google Analytics. And it'll then pull all this data and it'll take you to that spot. So it's also a great way to learn, like, where are these different reports and different screens within analytics. So cool. You guys have been great. Thanks so much. I'm going to go sit outside somewhere and drink a beer and hang out. It's a beautiful day. It didn't start that way, but it's gorgeous right now. So thanks everybody. See you guys.